Cindy Owen with Simply Fabrics in Waco, Texas. Today I'm going to be demoing really one of our favorite quilt classes that we have. It's called Got Scraps. It's by Charlie Quilter's Haven. It's a great little pattern that gives you a quilt that actually has scalloped edges, that's bound while you quilt it. You don't have an extra binding to do, and it's quilted in lots of small parts rather than one big part. You do have a couple of big seams toward the end, but you have this nice scallop, and it's truly reversible. You've got the pattern that looks like an applique orange peel quilt on one side, and you've got a great scrappy quilt on the other side. Here's one with 30s fabrics. Here's one that's done in blues. These are just a lot of blues from my stash, plus a few others that I added. So it's truly reversible. So this is what I'm going to be demoing today. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by making a 4-patch. The more scraps the better you have for this. And you're just starting with a simple, probably the beginner's easiest little patch to start with is a 4-patch. So make your 4-patch, and then you're going to want to get some batting. Now the pattern actually calls for, I believe, Thermore batting, which is a nice flat batting, and then they hand based at one point. But I like to use the Hobbs Heirloom fusible batting. You don't want the regular premium, you want the fusible. I like to use this, and then I don't have to hand baste. So you could take your pick, use what you like. So I cut my batting up into, for this particular size, I cut it up into 8-inch squares. I just unroll my batting a little bit, leave it kind of thick, and I'm cutting it into 8-inch squares. I'm going to sew your 4-patch, and then you're going to iron that, press that on. I'll use a press cloth on my ironing board, but it's really a light fusible. Even if you were to iron it like this, you could peel it right off. Okay, so you'll do that, set that aside. Now you're going to take whatever your plain fabric is. So in this case, it'll be this fabric. Okay, my plain fabric. On the wrong side, if it has a wrong side, I'll use the round tool and lay it down right on my fabric and get my pencil and draw a line all the way around it. You want to be real nice and accurate. And then down the middle, there's this little dashed line, and that marks your quarter points. So you're just going to make a little mark that you can see easily at each of those quarter points. Then you'll go to your rotary mat, and you'll use this ruler that comes in the kit, and it has an arc right here, and it has 2 little marks right here. Okay, so we're going to actually take this and lay this ruler where this long line goes all the way to the corner, and we're going to match that arc up to the arc that we just drew. Line that up. Then I'll use my rotary cutter to cut a slit, just one slit, and it's just between these 2 marks. One little slit. Okay, so now there's the slit. That's what that looks like, just one of them. Now pull back your 4-patch that has your batting on there, and you're going to lay that on, and you're going to put those quarter points right where that seam is. Okay, so this is, since we started with 4 1/4-inch squares, we're going to end up with this is an 8-inch square now. It can be bigger, and you can trim it if you want to, but it at least needs to be at least that big. This is actually cut at 7 3/4, so that you can see where that seam is. It just makes it a little easier to see that seam. Okay, so we're matching that up. That's going to keep your intersection of your 4-patch oriented dead center in your circle. So now we're going to pin it, and I like to pin it where my pins are going out. Like as I'm pinning it, the point goes out. That way, if there's any fullness, you work it out to the outside edge rather than working it toward the center. So you pin it. This is all the pins you need, and you're going to sew on that line all the way around. So it looks like this. And rather than back stitch on a circle, I find it a little easier to just overlap. Where I start my thread going around, I'll just overlap about 1 inch. So the threads just overlap, and that forms the same purpose of holding that seam together, and a little easier on the curve. So you sew that all the way around. Next, you're going to take it to your rotary mat, and you're going to lay this little tool, this little arc tool. See, it has a little dash line. You're going to lay that dash line right on the seam line that you just sewed. And what this does, you'll just cut it around here with your rotary cutter, slide it around. That's going to give you a scant quarter. You could cut it with scissors, but this is a little bit easier on your hands, a little bit faster. So you'll just use that to trim it all the way around. So now it'll look like this. And so at this point, you're going to turn it right side out. You don't need to clip it or anything. Just turn it right side out through that one opening. And use your point turner or whatever to poke your seam all the way out to the edge, and iron it on both sides. That fusible batting is fusible on both sides. Real light fusible. It's not a permanent adhesive. It'll just hold it together good enough so that you can do the machine quilting and hold that real nice for you. So when you turn it, you end up with a little tortilla. And at this point, you're going to do your first quilting, and it'll be just stitch in the ditch. So some of your quilting is going to be done just on little bitty circles. It's not on a great big quilt. So a lot of it's just real small like that. So you'll quilt your circles, and you'll take 2 of them. Okay, now we have to deal with this slip. We don't want that showing on our quilt, so we're gonna actually hide it in the seam allowance. So we're gonna match up where those 2 seams are. Make sure those fabrics are not the same. And we're gonna go back to use your ruler and your pencil. And I'm matching up that seam with that seam that's right under it. It's really easy to tell because you've just stitched it. And I'm gonna match it right there at the edge where that seam hits the outer edge, and over here also, and just draw a line. And we're going to stitch on that line, and it'll look like this. So there's my drawn line. I stitched it, and now I want to iron it. Now this is a pretty thick seam. You can use your iron, but a great tool for this I found is a clapper. And what this is it's a piece of hardwood maple. It's a hardwood. And you take your iron and you just open that up and blast of steam. And then you put the clapper down on it. So blast of steam, clap it down. What happens is, if we were just to use our iron just regularly with that, this is such a thick seam, when you pick it up, it just kind of raises back up. There's a lot of seams like that, like when you're doing star points, you've got a lot of intersections, you've got to iron a thick seam in a direction that it doesn't naturally want to go. So the clapper is a great tool to help you make that seam go the direction that you want it to go and get it as flat as you want it to be. So blast of steam, clap it down, the moisture draws up into the wood and cools it while it's flat. So it doesn't keep raising back up on you and you don't actually end up overworking your fabric. So that's a great tool for that. So we made a unit like this, pressed it flat, made 2 of them, and we're going to sew them together into a 4 unit. So what we're going to do now, similar to what we did before, we're going to match up that seam, we're going to match up this seam with the one below it. We're also going to match up this intersection here as well. So we're going to match those up. Now we want to draw a sewing line. And if I found that over the years of doing this pattern, if people have a problem, this is usually where it is. I want to show you how to avoid that. So what you're thinking, okay, I'm going to match this up here and match this up here and draw my line. But there's one problem. You've got this little intersection that's pretty thick. And if you were to try to sew over that, you would break your needle. But even if you could sew over it, you don't want to, because you want this quilt block to lay flat. Remember, it's made to look like the old-fashioned orange peel quilt, so we have got to sew to nothing. We don't want to seam allowance here at all, or it will not lay flat, and you won't be happy with the results. So what we're going to do to avoid that is I'm going to place my ruler right at that seam, and right here I'm going to bump this point out. I'm going to leave that there, but I'm going to pivot the ruler out just a little bit. So I've got just a little smidgen of airspace, like 2 stitches worth, that's going to be right here. So I'll draw a line here. Okay, but I'm not going to bring my ruler and draw it straight like that, because this isn't matching down here. So I'm going to leave this right where it was and tip it just slightly so I come back to the edge of that stitching. So, and then I'll draw that line. So what happens is, once you've drawn your line, you'll actually back stitch, stitch on that line, back stitch again. Anytime you change from one circle to the next circle from now on in your quilt, you want to back stitch so that your quilt will hold together. So make sure you're back stitching when you go from one circle to the next. So back stitch, so back stitch, and then you're going to chain off onto nothing. A couple of stitches onto nothing, just a couple of stitches. Shouldn't be a bunch, just a couple. And then when you cross over to this next one, you're going to back stitch again, sew and back stitch. Now, if you'd sewed a regular quilt with the line that wasn't quite straight, when you went to lay it up to make your quilt sandwich with your batting, backing, and top, your top would not lay flat, and you'd have some fullness when you're trying to quilt it. But this is not going to be a problem on this particular project, because all these squares and everything are already quilted, and actually they're already bound. So that's not a problem on this particular project. So you're going to stitch that line. You're going to make sure you go off into nothing right there at that intersection. And so what you end up with is a piece like this. And there's a little bitty hole, but it's a little finished hole that's right in the middle because you've chained off, remember, a couple of stitches. So there's a little bitty hole. I don't know that you can see it in this light, but it's a finished hole. And so if you crochet a blanket, you have all kinds of finished holes all over it. This is just one little finished hole that helps it to lay flat. You see here, if we didn't If we had had a seam allowance, that wouldn't lay flat and it wouldn't look right. So you must have that little, just a small little hole right there. Okay, so now we did a whole lot of quilting when it was in the tortilla stage, but now we've got a little bit bigger unit, and so a lot more of the quilting is going to be done at this stage. So you've got a unit this size instead of a great big quilt. So you're going to all you're going to do is edge stitch. So we're going to start at one side, edge stitch all the way around in an arc. Then you're going to leave your needle down and pivot, and go all the way around this way, all the way around this way, pivot, and all the way up back where you were. So now it looks like this. So that held that stitching down really nice, holds it down nice and flat, and look what happens on the back. You've got this beautiful pattern, quilt pattern, that you didn't mark or anything. It's just a result of sewing your edge stitching around here. So lots of your quilting was done at the tortilla stage. A lot more of it is done at this stage. So whenever you're going to peel a piece of quilt, you're going to make a bunch of units like this, because it makes the quilting part a lot easier, because you can do this kind of stitching. So you'll have, here's another one. As you build it, you just add on. You draw your line just like we did before, and you're going to actually build with in another set of 4. So you get 4 of these, sew them together. You see what it's looking like with these fabrics. You put it together in 4 units. So like this quilt was built, you can see this is a 4 unit. This is where that was. Add it on. So you just keep adding on 4 units, make a big 4 units. 4 of these 4 units actually made this little baby quilt. So now the patterns come in different sizes. You can make this. I like to use this as the small size, and I used that size that I just demoed to make a little table runner. So it's reversible. You can do the lighter or the darker. Say you made this table runner and you wish a month later, oh, I wish I'd made it a little bit longer. You can add another one. Wherever you decide to stop, it's already quilted and bound. That's one of the beauties of this. When you're making a quilt, you do eventually have a couple of long seams at the end, but so much of it is done when it's small. It's really helpful getting around your sewing machine. Say you make a baby quilt, and 3 years later you wish you'd made it bigger, and you don't have any more fabric. You could actually say you're out of this white, you don't have any more of this, can't match it. You could do something in, say, a lighter blue, and just add a border of more circles all the way around it. I mean, not many quilts can you do that. Have that binding can just be sewn back into your quilt. So that's a lot of fun with this quilt. So I want to show you about some other sizes on this quilt. So this is the small that I just demoed. This is the extra small. Okay, so they actually have a little extra small quilt. This one's done instead of the got scraps that started with a 4 patch. This is just 2 plain pieces of fabric. So this is the extra small, little tool kit for that. This is a medium size kit, and it's a little bit, it starts with a 10-inch square, and I can show you some sizes. So this is the 10-inch, okay? So what I just demoed was got scraps. It's just one pattern in Charlie's different line of different kind of patterns that she's actually developed. It was the got scraps is what we just did. But her basic book is called Less Than Traditional, and it actually starts with just 2 fabrics. So I'll just show you that. Here's one done. This is a really great little flannel quilt. There's no batting in it at all. Has this beautiful, shows a beautiful quilting design really nicely with the flannel. It just starts with 2 layers of fabric. You can also do it with the batting, of course. This is two purples, batiks that I used on this one. So it's a little bit easier that you're not making the 4 patch first. Here's one in green. Okay, so these are all using the small tool kit. All right, there's a couple of different sizes, so that's the small. This is also a flowers that she can make. She has flowers, and she also has a new one that has butterflies that you can use. So this doesn't tell you how to make the circles. She assumes you already know that when you go to flowers. Okay, so flowers, you can make something like a poinsettia. Here's one that's more like a lily, perhaps. So I was thinking on that, like a lily on the pond. That's all using the small. Then you can also get an extra small. This is a really cute little mini. Okay, so this is a little mini one. It still does the quilt. It's all made the same way, just a little bit smaller unit. And then this is the medium-sized kit. And in all these, she has several different patterns for little different ways that you can do things. I just demoed the got scraps, but there's a lot of other things you can do with it. So this is the medium size, done with just the 2 fabrics. If you're doing something like a big quilt or anything, something really large like that, This is a little more fabric efficient, a little more time, it takes a little less time, and you have less circles to do. And on a big bed, you can still see the pattern. If you're doing table runners and baby quilts and all, I like the small the best, but you could have your pick. Here's actually the poinsettia done with the medium-sized kit also. And this is a great one to put for a little bit bigger table runner. You can make a table runner out of this. On this one, I took the flowers and did the sunflower. So on this, I put a yo-yo right here. On the these flowers, we glued buttons. You could do beads or something else if you like. So that's the next size up.